I do want to know why analysts are so happy about this news and say that it's actually a positive thing that you know, the bosses that have been spoken about and the companies that have been mentioned, that this is a positive move in the right direction.
I think it is. It's a very positive move, and I think it's an alignment of CEO remuneration to shareholder outcomes. I think that's something that's been missing for a lot of CEO remuneration in the past, that company performance needs to be more tightly linked to the salaries that the CEO demands.
But then at the end of the day, is it not, I mean, one of the things that you would look at, because you were talking to me about a study that you had done on some of the criteria that you would look at, what the CEO's performance has been, the experience, and all of those things, putting those things into perspective as well.
Correct. We ran a study at the beginning of the year in February. We took 212 JSE listed companies, and we compared actual CEO remuneration to that level that can be explained by three primary factors: the experience of the CEO, the size of the company, and then most importantly, the returns that they generate for their shareholders. What we found is that for many CEOs, it doesn't explain the remuneration packages. Some CEOs are dramatically overpaid relative to the level that should be explained using those three factors. Many are considerably underpaid as well.
But who's overpaying them?
Well, it's their boards, it's their companies. And you have to ask why. Why is management misaligned to shareholder outcomes? Is it government quiescence? Is it managerial aggrandization? Because the bottom line is delivering returns to the shareholders is the primary role of the company.
One of the things that I have found, Peter, and I think this is I mean, not only I've found, but this has been said across the globe, is that this is not an issue that facing South Africa alone. And I think the financial crisis did this to us, that we kind of began to ask, well, why are CEOs getting paid so much on a global level, not just here in South Africa?
I agree. And to dispute that a little bit, I have no problem with paying people lots and lots of money. In many cases, I'd argue that some of the CEOs, especially the ones that appeared towards the bottom of our list, deserve more. It's just an alignment between outcomes, delivery to the shareholders of returns, that should actually be used to justify CEO remuneration, rather than some arbitrarily determined number that continues in perpetuity.
So now, with the shareholders, I mean, this is their, at the end of the day, what the company does is going to affect, you know, how much money they're going to get from it. So why hasn't this been an issue that they've probably brought, or have they been bringing this issue and have been ignored?
I think they have. I think also that these type of things are brought to the light in economic downturns. People start taking a closer look at the books and trying to find ways where they can drive efficiencies and returns. In periods of growth, companies don't look at cost cutting. They don't really consider costs because growing revenues drive growth for the shareholders. It's only in times where companies are forced to tighten the belts that they look back at the books and start to find areas where they can find efficiencies. And one of the areas that's been highlighted, I think particularly in South Africa, is remuneration of top executives.
So Peter, I want to go back to the study that you did. What did you find about the CEOs that were overpaid, and what did you find about the CEOs that were underpaid? Where was the disconnect in both groups?
Well, what we found is that if we look only at shareholder performance as an explanation of CEO pay, while it is a driver, it accounts for only approximately 3% of what determines CEO pay. So there's many other factors that might drive it. As I said, managerial aggrandization, government quiescence, employee benefits. There are some other things, how successfully a person has navigated the implementation of technology in their environments. But if we look purely at shareholder performance, that really hasn't been a determinant. And when we look at those three factors, firm size, CEO experience, a number of years, and then obviously that performance, we find that some CEOs are dramatically overpaid. So the two CEOs that were mentioned is Bernard Cantor and Stephen Kossef of Investec, who've recently announced dramatic reductions in their remuneration.
And dramatic, from what I was reading, I mean, I don't know how accurate it is because I haven't spoken to them, but from the reports that are coming out, dramatic in the sense of almost 90% of their pay gone.
Correct. They will experience an 87% reduction in their take-home remuneration. Don't feel too sorry for them. What they are getting is still relatively large, and that's the amount that's justified by firm performance. That firm in particular has not performed for their shareholders of late, and I think it's perfectly justifiable that they look to senior management to answer for some of those.
What I do have to ask you, and not just in South Africa, what I do have to ask you though is, and we have talked about this being a global trend, is could there be a time when a person like the CEOs that we've spoken about, the executives, say, well, you know what, I'm accustomed to getting my full pay and I don't want to lose my 87% of what I have been earning, and they might look elsewhere, they might look outside of the country. Could that happen at all?
Potentially, as I said, maybe we highlight too much on the CEOs that are overpaid. Cynthia Carroll of Anglo American, Jackie Maria of Standard Bank came out as significantly underpaid, underpaid by more than 5 million rand. So they may be going to their Remcos and saying, we actually have delivered performance beyond what we're being paid for. I think that this is something that's going to prevail across all remuneration strategies, not just among senior executives. That pay in the future is going to be far more tightly linked to the output that you actually deliver.
But then who is the person or the organization that says this is how much? I mean, all the criteria that you've given, I would imagine that they're measurable. You are able to measure these criteria and say, well, this is what should happen. You know, who is the organization or who's the company that would have to do this? Would individual companies have to look at themselves to be able to monitor this?
Agreed. I think this is something that individual firms are going to have a look at. There's obviously a basic level of remuneration that's explained by other factors besides just performance. So as I said, the size of the company that you manage, the amount of experience you have in the job, the knowledge that you bring into the role would all determine a baseline level of pay that's perfectly justifiable. I think it's the bonuses and the sort of extreme pay levels that need to be more tightly linked to firm performance.
And then again, you're saying it's only extreme because if the company's not performing at the level that you're being paid, then that should be looked at. Not extreme in the sense that there shouldn't be people earning that kind of money.
Correct, correct. If you can deliver performance, if you can deliver performance beyond your shareholders' expectations, you could effectively write your own paycheck. And I think it's not just CEOs, as I said. I think at entry level, employees would be far happier with being paid for output rather than simply paid for time. If you could get the same amount of work done in half a day as somebody else, why shouldn't you earn twice as much as them or only work half days?
And I would imagine that would be more productive, you know, at the end of the day and feed into the entire economy. Thank you so much for coming in.